Greetings ladies and gentlefish, and welcome to this review of the Soviet Tier 8 Premium Heavy Tank, the IS-6. And just before we go any further, some of you, especially those who have been with the channel a little bit longer, may be looking at this and getting a decided sense of deja vu. Haven't we been here before? And yes, we have. However, there are a few tank reviews I've put out, and I'm thinking in particular those that are Tier 8 premium tanks. You've got the IS-6, the Lerva, the 112. I've probably missed one or two out. And since I put those reviews up, the game has changed, and or the tank itself has physically changed. And so things are a bit different from what they once were. Given that these are Tier 8 premiums, they are the sort of thing that people, generally speaking, are quite interested in knowing how they fare, because, well, if one wants to buy one, they're not an insubstantial amount of money. So I thought it was worth going back and revisiting some of those Tier 8 premiums that I've put a review out for, but it's been a little while or things have changed since I did it. So with that in mind, the IS-6. For those who don't know, just a little bit of history about this thing. The IS-6 existed in two different forms. You had the Object 252 and the Object 253. Not to be confused with the Object 252U. Yeah, I know, a little bit confusing. Both the Object 252 and 253, I believe, were supposed to use the same hull. Essentially, the difference between them was that one used an electric transmission and one used a conventional transmission. During the Second World War and in the few years that followed, electric transmissions kind of, I don't want to say became all the rage, but people were definitely interested in trying to develop them. They offered the potential to be well, better than the previous mechanical transmissions. However, much like the electric transmissions on things like the Tiger P and the Ferdinand, these had a habit of being a bit naff. They'd been overheating and things like that. So that never really went ahead, and then the version of the tank with the conventional transmission, well, the Soviets looked at it and said, why would we bother developing this further compared to other tanks we're developing at the same time with roughly the same capabilities? Which was a fair point. So the IS-6 never really got off the ground as a result. But here in World of Tanks, it is of course a very, very different story. This is a Tier 8 premium tank. It's a premium, so we don't need to worry about the grind and all that jazz. But I would just like to take a moment here to mention that, or to remind people, what it means to be a premium tank. So if you have a premium tank, that means, one, it has cost, generally speaking, real money. There is a price tag associated with this. We're not just talking in-game credits, we're talking your hard-earned cash. It's called a premium tank for a reason. I mean, yeah. Two, what is it you actually get? Well, firstly, they tend to get reduced repair costs and reduced ammunition costs. So they tend to be quite cheap to run, and as a result, they are generally fairly profitable. At Tier 8, on top of this, they get an enhanced credit multiplier. Basically, the Tier 8 premiums, generally speaking, are really good at printing credits. So that's something to bear in mind. Thirdly, in any premium tank, you can take an existing heavy tank crew trained to one of your other tanks and put it in your premium tank, and without retraining, they will suffer no penalty for being in a tank they are not trained to. What that means in practice is that you can have one crew doing the rounds through a number of different premium tanks and getting crew training, crew experience each time, and so they train up faster. So just to give you an example, this is my IS-3 crew. I can transfer them to my IS-6. Here they are. You can see these guys are trained to the IS-3. It's even put in red, but it specifically states premium vehicle of correct type. The crew member does not have specialization on the IS-6, but he can use his skills and perks because he is a crew member from the same nationality and the same tank type operating a premium tank. So my IS-3 crew, Soviet heavy tank crew, can operate my premium Soviet IS-6, Soviet premium heavy tank, with no penalty, without any retraining or any of that tap. Let's get that out of the way. So there's just a reminder for people, and now let's actually have a look at the IS-6 itself. What do we physically get? Well, before going any further, I'm going to take a quick look at the price of this thing so you can bear that in mind when you're considering whether or not you want to buy it. 11,800 gold. That's quite a lot. Let's compare it to some other tier 8 premiums just to give you an idea of how that compares. So, that's the IS-6. It was 11,800. T54 Mod 1, 8,750. Considerably cheaper. Okay, let's have a look at the Germans. What have we got in the German tech tree? Tier 8, we have got the, if I can just find tier 8, Panther 88, 7,300. Lerva, 12,500. Okay, what about the Americans? There's the T-34 in there somewhere, 12,000. Super Pershing, 7,200. What you generally find, there was once a generation of Tier 8 premium heavy tanks. These are the old school tanks. The IS-6, the T-34, the 112. And these were around about the 12,000 gold mark. Then Wargaming decided to introduce a bunch of Tier 8 medium tanks. And these came in at a lower price point. And actually, before they introduced that generation, we already had the Super Pershing, which was in at a lower price point anyway. I was never quite sure why, but it was. So, in terms of price, this is one of the most expensive tanks that you will buy for real money in the game. There is no getting around that. However, it's not priced any more really than the T-34 or the Lerva or the other machines of the same generation. So that's just a quick note about price. What is it we actually get in the game? Well, we have a 1,550 hit point machine with 100mm of frontal hull armor, 100mm of side armor, 60 rear, and on the turret 150, 150, and 100. And at a first glance, that doesn't actually sound very impressive. 1,550 hit points is fine. It's, you know, there or thereabouts for a tier 8 heavy tank. I mean, the IS-3 has 1,500, the Defender has 1,500. I could go on and make more comparisons, but I can't be bothered. The hull, 100, 100, 60, and on the turret, 150, 150, 100. That sounds a bit on the weedy side, and it is. But the thing you have to bear in mind is that this thing is angled and sloped like it's going out of fashion. And there's shed tons of spaced armour on it, and the sides are made of Soviet bullshitanium and all the rest of that jazz. So actually, the IS-6 is a very well armoured machine. And since I made my last review of this machine, it actually got a HD remodel, which gave it an armour buff, of all things, because it really needed that. So we're going to discuss the armour in a bit more detail later, as we usually do, but for now, it suffices to say that the armour on this tank is actually probably its greatest strength, if we're going to be honest. Especially when you combine that with the fact that this machine gets limited matchmaking. Tier 8 tank, it will see Tier 8 matches and Tier 9 matches, but unless you try and platoon like an utter muppet, it will not see Tier 10s. So use that to your advantage. This is a bit of a bully. Mobility, well, it's a 52-ton tank with a 700 horsepower engine, specific power 13.39, which is very much in the heavy tank range. I mean, this thing isn't going to win any speed contests, generally speaking, but it's not hideously slow. We're not talking super heavy. This is not a KV-5. This is not a mouse. This is not, you know, one of the really sluggish heavy tanks. And it has a top speed of 35 kilometers an hour, which ain't half bad. Reverse speed of 14, which is fine, and a traverse speed of 28, which is, again, fine. The mobility on this tank is good enough. It's not a speed demon, but it's good enough. Concealment, it's a heavy tank. Who cares? But it is relatively low profile. So it's not as easily spottable as like a mouse or something, but really, this tank is designed to be used at point blank range. It is not a sniper, it is not sneaky. You hold down W, you drive into your opponent's face, and you batter them to death with the gun. That's how you use the tank, and with that regard, the camouflage, the concealment is kind of irrelevant. Ditto for spotting, which is a good thing because a 350 meter view range at tier 8 is god awful. Really don't get too excited about that. Oh, but it's got a good radio. Oh, but no one cares. Yeah, it's got a good radio. Big wow. Let's have a quick talk about that gun, though. This is the 122mm D30. It's basically a D25T with a different name. Seriously, if you have played any Soviet or Chinese tanks, you know these guns by now. Big, derpy, 122mm. However, something to note about this machine is you get 5.13 rounds per minute rate of fire. Okay, what about the IS-3? That's 4.51. That's considerably different. What else uses this style of gun? Let's go and have a look at the Chinese. What about the 112? 4.55. Long story short, with this gun, the IS-6 actually has pretty respectable DPM. In fact, I believe it is it used to be, I don't know if this is still the case because there have been a bunch more premium tanks introduced, but it used to be the second highest DPM of any Tier 8 premium heavy tank, only beaten by the KV-5, which has even worse penetration and much lower alpha damage. So, what are you getting? 5.13 rate of fire, which, given the alpha damage, is actually really good. 175 penetration is nothing to get too excited about, but Tier 8, limited matchmaking, is it good enough? Well, that's really... I'll come back to that in just a moment, because that's an arguably contentious point. 390 alpha damage, which is very nice. 0.46 dispersion at 100 meters, and a 3.4 second aim time, both of which suck, and kind of dictate that you want to be using this tank at point blank range. However, the soft stats on this gun are not half bad at all. And so, actually, you don't necessarily have to aim as much as you might otherwise think. It's quite nice in that regard. It doesn't have the bloom values of the 112, which make you want to strangle kittens. But let's just come back to that penetration. One of the reasons... I've heard people say this tank needs a buff recently. And one of the reasons is that with the introduction of machines like the Japanese heavy tanks, you've got the Patriot, you've got the Liberté, you've got the Object 252... People are saying, oh, well, those tanks are really hard to penetrate with 175 penetration. And you know what? They're not wrong. And on paper, I can see their point. This gun isn't necessarily a fantastic gun. However, having played this tank recently, specifically with the purpose of trying to test these claims, the IS-6 performed absolutely fine, if I'm going to be honest. There have always been tanks that you do not want to engage in this thing. You never wanted to face an E-75 either, because it would beat the snot out of you. It's got enough penetration that your armour kinda doesn't really work anymore, and enough armour that your gun kinda doesn't really work anymore. And so you sit there and go, well, I'm free XP. You don't want to face an E-75, you don't want to face an ST-1, you don't want to face an Object 252, you don't want to face a Patriot. That's nothing new. There are tanks that you do not want to face. Conversely, you have to bear in mind, yes, Wargaming have introduced an assortment of tanks that the IS-6 doesn't want to face, but they've also introduced some new tanks that the IS-6 is fine to face. The Emil, the Emil-1, the Swedish Tier 8 heavy tank. Face off against that, fine. If you get its hull, you can penetrate its hull, and its accuracy, aim time, penetration, they're all a little bit dodgy, and so your armour isn't too bad against that. And if he can't kill you in one magazine, you've got the DPM to just beat him to death. So, this is why I don't like theory crafting too much, because people come up with reasons as to why a particular tank is terrible or amazing, but if you haven't actually played it and you haven't seen it in action, I personally find those opinions to be a bit meaningless. What can I say? I'm a scientist. I think it's all in the experimentation. So, in my opinion, the IS-6 is fine in that regard. It doesn't need a massive buff. You basically, with the IS-6, it is a bully. Yes, there are tanks you do not want to face. You don't want fair fights. Fair fights are for losers. You want to pick on low-tier tanks. You want to pick on softly armoured targets. You want to pick on tanks that struggle to penetrate you, and you want to take that 122mm gun, and you want to beat them, and you beat them until they give up. That's how you play the IS-6, and you do it from point-blank range, and you make a shed ton of money in crew XP while you do it. Quick note about equipment, consumables, ammunition, crew skills, all of that good stuff. I don't think any of this is going to come as a massive surprise to anyone, but let's do it anyway. Crew skills, well, you should be using whatever Soviet heavy tank crew you have. You shouldn't have a crew specifically tailored to this machine because it is a premium tank. This is my IS-3 crew. Any of the skills you'd have on an IS-3 work lovely on an IS-6. If for whatever reason you do want to have crew skills specifically for this tank, don't do this. But I've been asked to mention it on other videos anyway. Sixth Sense is your friend. Safe Storage is always a good bet just in case. Repairs is your friend. Brothers in Arms is your friend. Snapshot, Smooth Ride, all the usual good stuff. I wouldn't bother with view range enhancing crew skills because your view range is bloody awful anyway, and however much you try and make that better, it's never going to be a strength of the tank. And you should never really be relying on the view range on this thing in an ideal world anyway, so don't worry too much about that. Equipment, nothing surprising. Vertical stabilizer. If you can mount a vert stab, you mount a vert stab. Rule number 1 of World of Tanks equipment. 2, gun rammer. Because rule number 2 of World of Tanks equipment is if you can mount a gun rammer, you mount a gun rammer. There are always exceptions to the rule, but whatever, you get the point. Number 3, I would say vents. I'm not really sure what else you would pick. Meh. Toolbox, I guess if you're being really cheap, but I wouldn't really bother. Heavy spool liner, maybe, but I would still choose vents. I don't really have problems with fuel tank durability, well, not enough to waste a bit of equipment on it anyway. Enhanced gun laying drive is the only one I can really see any sort of argument for, and the soft stats on this gun are not bad. I do not think you need an enhanced gun laying drive. I would pick vents. Ammunition. Now, this is where you do have to be a little bit careful. In common with a lot of the other Soviet heavy tanks, especially the ones with this kind of low profile going on, doesn't carry a huge amount of ammunition. You've got 30 rounds, which may sound like a good number, but with that rate of fire, and with the slightly dubious penetration, you can actually burn through those rounds faster than you might expect. So what I've got is 1 HE round, because there are always times when a little bit of HE loving is what you want. Maybe to decap, maybe you're facing a Borsig, whatever the reason is. I don't carry more than 1 because of the limited ammo supply, but 1 HE round. I've then got 5 rounds of APCR. The grim reality is that 175 penetration on your armor piercing isn't fantastic, but 217 on your APCR, you know what, that's also not fantastic. Most regular tier 8 heavy tanks have more penetration than that on their regular rounds. So I have a few of them, but in my opinion, a lot of the time, if you can't penetrate them with 175 pen, you probably can't penetrate them with 217 either. I mean, an E75 is going to look at either of those and go, pah! An Object 252 Defender is going to look at either of those and go, nope, don't care. So, yeah, it's, I don't actually find the APCR that useful. So I have the rest armor piercing, and you want to go and find those soft squidgy targets, and you want to kill them. Consumables, again, nothing surprising here. First aid kit, repair kit, fire extinguisher. You might want to trade those out for the larger ones if you wanted. Some people like using a removed speed governor. And now that actually your repair kit is a consumable that has a cooldown timer, and so you'll get it back, maybe you do want to go with a removed speed governor. Maybe this is going to become the day of the removed speed governors. But I probably wouldn't bother, to be honest. Because you've only got a top speed of 35 kilometers an hour anyway. So, and it's taking up the slot of another bit of equipment. Lend-Lease oil, again, I probably wouldn't bother. You might want to go with extra combat rations, that's always an option, and just to give it an all-round buff, but I just stick with the standard bits of equipment, and they seem to do me fine. Crew skills, consumables, ammunition, equipment. I think that's everything I wanted to say. One last thing to note, actually, just before we go any further. 6 degrees of gun depression on this tank, which is, well, it's not amazing, but you know what? It's enough to not be a massive hindrance. Yeah. That's pretty much the best you can say about it. And just to let you know, with my setup and this crew, the reload time on this gun is less than 10 seconds. For 390 alpha at tier 8, that's pretty sweet. That's DPM of 2,423. That's pretty nice. So, yeah, that's pretty sweet to have. So enough waffling, let's go and see what this thing can do in some fatting. Right, module locations for the IS-6 then. Perhaps unsurprisingly, from the front, behind what looks to be a hatch, possibly a driver's hatch, we have the driver. Didn't see that one coming, did you? From the side of the tank, you have got the gunner and the commander over here on the left-hand side of the turret. The rear of the tank, unsurprisingly, is engine and fuel tank central. Rear of the tank, you've got radio here, you've got more engine. I mean, nothing here is massively surprising. Got a loader in the right-hand side here, more engine and fuel tank. The one thing that is interesting to note, actually, though, is that nowhere on here is the ammo rack marked, which means when the people were making this particular hitbox location thing, they weren't really able to find the ammo rack, and that's something I've experienced as well. I don't remember the IS-6 getting ammo racked, not even once. So the ammo rack seems to be hidden somewhere. Maybe it's at the back of the turret, I don't know. But you don't really get ammo racked very much in the IS-6, which is fairly nice. Occasionally you lose a driver. It's about the worst that you get in the IS-6, to be honest. So let's have a look at the armor. Okay then, here we have the IS-6, and boom, here is its armor. And you can see, yes, technically it is 100mm thick, and all those numbers that the garage tells you, but that doesn't really tell you the whole story. So we're going to start off with that big fat Soviet booty. Rear of the tank, 60mm, but do bear in mind that's sloping, which means the rear is actually closer to, well, 100mm. If hit flat on. There's a zone down here which is 80 because why not? It's where you've got this track link at the back. So Wargaming have decided they're going to make that an extra 20mm thick because you've got a track shoved on the bum. Something to bear in mind. Rear of the turret, 100mm thick with a little bit of angling going on. You know, angled at what, 20 odd degrees or something. So that is looking at about 100mm of effective armor. Shouldn't be too difficult to shoot this thing from the rear. Side of the hull, you've got this segment up here at the top of the hull, which is 100mm thick, as advertised in the garage, with some sloping. So effective armor thickness is about 120, 130, something around about there. Coming down here, things start getting a bit funky, as you suddenly have a strip of spaced armor over the side of the tank. So 100mm of armor plus 30mm of spaced armor gives you 170mm of effective armor. If you come further down, you meet the tracks, but you have to be really careful about the shape of the hull. So down here, you've got tracks, but, well, you're not actually going to be hitting the hull really anymore. This is the only bit where you can really still hit the hull, and that's effectively 170mm thick before you angle it yourself. Side of the turret is the 150 advertised with a bit of sloping, so that's 170 odd effective thickness. It varies obviously across the turret itself. Front of the hull, well, we have got 100mm on the upper plate, sloped back to give you approximately 170mm of effective armor. So that's not too bad. Lower plate is actually 120. It is thicker and sloped back sufficiently to make the lower plate of the IS-6 a massive bag of nope. Don't even bother. Unless the tank is like coming over a thing straight at you and you've got it flat on, do not try and shoot the lower plate of the IS-6. And really sneakily, this commander's hatch, which back in the day used to be a weak point, for some unfathomable reason, sorry, it's a driver's hatch, for some unfathomable reason, Wargaming decided this needed to be 110mm thick rather than 100. So whereas the rest of the upper front plate is between 170, say, and 185mm thick, this is about 200 of effective armor, which is kind of annoying. Looking at the turret, 150 they say. Well, yes, technically it is, but you've got sloping on the cheeks, meaning you're looking at whole lots of, nah, that's not going to happen. And then around the gun, you've got gun mantlet. 394, see that? Yeah. If you get really close to the gun, there's going to be a hole where the gun's poking out, right? Only where the gun actually is itself, and then you have gun, 50mm of spaced armor, and that gives you effective 200mm thickness. Short version, don't shoot the turret. It used to be that if you shot the turret just here, that was actually a weak point on the turret, and because there was a hole where the gun poked out of. You can see how weak it is now after the HD armor change, so just don't bother. And if you're wondering about the roof of the turret, well, because the roof of the turret is often a weak point on these Soviet machines. Strictly speaking, the roof of the turret is only 30mm thick, so you could overmatch it with plenty of guns. Good luck. You can't even hit it. Now, if you're turret hugging this thing and you're a taller tank, and this is quite low profile, so that's entirely possible, sure, go for it. But in any other situation, that ain't going to help you, Sonny Jim. With regard to these cupolas on the top, they are only 150mm thick, but you really have to hit them flat on, and they are very small targets to hit. So in my experience, they're really, really awkward. If you angle the hull on this tank, you can get about 219 on the upper plate, 220. You can get a whole big fat can of about 200 on the side. This shoulder plate here, there, then becomes your weakest part at about 180, 190mm thick. But yeah, the armor, the all-round armor on the IS-6 is very, very good. It's really reliable against guns up to about 200 penetration. Guns above 200 penetration can and will go through this, but then there are times when they can and will also bounce. I have bounced plenty of 250 pen guns on this thing, and these sides just eat shells for breakfast. Om nom 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 nom, tasty shells nom. The armor on this thing is really very, very impressive. Game number 1 then, tier 8 match, obviously, top tier here on Swamp of all maps. The map isn't necessarily the best for the IS-6, but we're going to give it our best go anyway. And you may or may not have noticed that each team has a fail platoon. Yay! The enemy AMX-ELC brought a Churchill 1 to the party, and our AMX-ELC brought a Hetzer to the party. Hurrah! Just what everyone needed, right guys? Anyway. So, we are here on Swamp. We are going to start off by going to your pretty traditional heavy tank face battering position. There is one artillery on each side. In this game. It's only a small artillery, it's an M44 in each case. So there is that. And I have no idea what I'm doing at the moment, to be honest. Haven't got a Scooby. But our friendly KV2 is saying, he just watched a video of an IS-6 killing the whole enemy team, and can I do that for him? Well, I will try my best, but I make no promises. We'll see how it goes. You know, I always try and kill the entire enemy team, but doesn't mean it's going to happen. Though, of all the tanks to do it in, the IS-6 isn't the worst. Though if you have to kill the entire enemy team, honestly, you'd probably run out of ammunition before you run out of bad guys. Anyway, finally made it up into your typical sort of heavy tank brawling spot. The IS-3, which is a tank I was concerned about, is down there, so I don't actually have to worry too much about him right now. And I've found a Tiger and a KV-85. Tiger is capable of penetrating me. Where did that shot actually go? Can we see? No, not really. Oh, well, never mind. Tiger is capable of penetrating me, though it's not a reliable thing. But Tiger 1, Cromwell... Whoa, that Cromwell has gone. Cromwell and a KV-85, of all the opponents I could be facing off against, I'm okay with that, if I'm going to be honest. Because the only one I really have to massively worry about is the Tiger. Take that shot on the move. Doesn't hit, but whatever. The rest are really going to struggle to penetrate me without double tapping their 2 key. And that Tiger's getting absolutely wrecked, and oh bless him, he's tier 6. See what I mean about bullying lower tier targets? He shoots me, he damages my tracks. He shoots me again, he just bounces harmlessly off. He has been tracked and he is dead in 2 shots. Yeah! KV-85 takes my tracks out as well. I'll just wait for my crew to put them back on. A good repair crew is always nice to have on your IS-6, because your tracks will eat a lot of shots for you. So, KV-85, hello! I have no idea where that shot went. You have to bear in mind, these derpy 122mm guns, well, they're derpy, so sometimes they're just going to flail you. AMX AC-46, he can definitely penetrate this tank, and sometimes they act like sniper rifles. I mean, what are you going to do? But he bounces on me. 300 alpha damage means he is using the big gun. That's 232 penetration for him, so he can definitely hurt me, but hey, my shot left a much bigger mark than his did, seeing as he didn't even penetrate. Aiming at the KV-85, executing the KV-85, 2 kills, scoreline is 5-2, and we've only taken 1 damaging shot so far. And we're just going to push onwards. AMX AC-46 is probably still around here somewhere. Still got the IS-3, there's a Super Pershing, a Type 58 and an IKV around here as well. Angle against the AMX, that shot does penetrate me. That one leaves him on 18 health. 18. T-150 bounces on him. Super Pershing bounces on me, and would you believe it, I actually appear to reload before he does. Even though my gun does more damage. Take a hit from the Super Pershing there, and he takes out my gunner. So that went into my turret. There is a very good chance he is firing a PCR. Yeah, to go through that bit of the turret, he's firing a PCR. So I'm just not going to engage him. He can actually respectably hurt me. We take a little bit of damage from the artillery there. No, not the end of the world. So we're not going to go and engage him. We're going to kill the artillery, and then we're going to come up and plonk one in his bum while he is distracted with everyone else. Like that. Kill number 5. And that just leaves the IKV-90B over here. No idea quite. Is the guy going to come out and let me pick up a Top Gun? Yeah. Yeah. Apparently I'm not allowed the Top Gun. There we go. 4 minutes 50. Game is over. I didn't kill the entire enemy team, but 5 kills is a third of them. I didn't think that was too bad. So let's go and have a look at the results for this one. Here we go then. That wasn't a particularly long game, but first class mastery, fire for effect, fighter, duelist, hand of God bruiser, and high caliber awards. Not too shabby, and you can see that's a lot of money. And experience, but more on that in a moment. 3,041 damage done, 5 kills, 1,273 base experience. Was that a particularly challenging game to play? No, not really. 13 shots fired, 10 hits, 10 penetrations for that damage count. 10 hits received, 4 penetrated, 6 did not. Now this is where you have to be a little bit careful. Only 750 damage blocked by my armor. However, when your tracks eat a shell, that isn't technically a shot that has been blocked by your armor. That counts as a penetrating shot because they penetrated that module, even though it does 0 hit point damage. So I actually soaked more than 750 damage there, even though that's all that is displayed on the post-game stats. 5 enemy vehicles spotted, 9 damaged, 5 destroyed, 913 assistance damage, 103,451 credits. Take away all the costs, even with a premium account. Sorry, with a premium account, that's an 84.5, well, almost 85,000 credits profit. With a standard account, that would have been over 50,000 credits profit in 4 minutes 51 seconds. IS-6, yeah. Times to experience event for times to experience for the first win of the day. Good amount of experience, but you can see what I mean. It doesn't take you too much to rack up quite a lot of damage and a lot of credits as a result in your IS-6. Oh, but Chip, all you did was shoot the weak tanks. You didn't engage any strong tanks. No, because I'm in an IS-6 and it doesn't like engaging strong tanks. And in that matchup, the only strong tank, if you will, or the ones that were really a threat that I came across were the AMX AC-46, because he has high penetration on that gun. But in a face-off against him, I have higher DPM, higher alpha damage, and more hit points. So it shouldn't be too difficult to win that engagement. And the Super Pershing. And as soon as I realised there was a Super Pershing firing gold at me, I just went somewhere else. Came back to him later. That's the sort of thing you end up doing in this tank. Anyway, as ever, I'm going to show you a tank where we're not top of the tree, not top of the feeding pool, feeding chain, whatever, as well, to give you an idea of how this thing fares when bottom tier. Tier 9 match then on Windstorm. Now, Granted, this isn't a particularly heavy tier 9 match. There's only 3 tier 9s on our team and 2 on the enemy team, and one of each of those is artillery. However, one of those that tier 9 on the enemy team is a bit of a nightmare tank for the IS-6. It's the VKB. Good luck penetrating him frontally, and yes, we are going to come across him. So I still thought this game was worth showing, though caveat, yes, obviously the IS-6 does prefer being top tier, clearly. But, you know, I always try and show, or generally try and show some games where the tank is not necessarily in its ideal element as well, to give you a much better rounded idea of how you can expect the tank to perform. So, Windstorm. For the IS-6, this is not a terrible map. You've got a nice big town, city area to fight it out in. And so that's where we're going. We've got myself coming over here. T-34B maybe coming over here. KV-4, Super Pershing. Batchat is way ahead of us off somewhere. And I have no idea where our E-75 has gone. Where is it? Oh, our E-75 is also coming over here. And there's the VKB. Somebody's found him. Right, well, I'm weighing up my options at this point. Ooh, Indian Panzer. Right. What I'm going to do is I'm going to try and side scrape round here and shoot the Indian Panzer, but he just lost a whole chunk of health, which means he's probably not going to want to come out and play. Boo! Fine. I'll drive over there and do it myself. Right. So, VKB, Lorraine, Spar Panzer, and an Indian Panzer. That's not the end of the world. Let's try not to get shot in the sides. Excellent. See if we can do something about the Indian Panzer. And we just take his tracks off, which is slightly irritating. I didn't exactly aim that shot particularly well. And the shot went where I aimed it, so I guess I've only got myself to blame for that one. But we picked up some assistance damage anyway. It's not the end of the world. Lorraine and VKB. I'm hoping, while these guys are distracted by an E-75 and a KV-4, that I'll be able to come up behind them and do some rogering, but I get spotted by the Spar Panzer, which is slightly annoying. He doesn't do any real damage to me, he just takes out my tracks. And we've got a Super Pershing here as well, and hopefully between us we can do something about these fellas. That was perhaps a poorly considered shot. Super Pershing drove in front of me, his gun was in the way, so I didn't actually do him any hit point damage. I did knock his gun out, most likely, which is... well, you do have to be careful with these guns. But there goes the Spar Panzer. Time for the Lorraine now, and boom, put one into the back of him, take his track out, I think. Yep, into the bargain, always worth trying to do. And now we've got the VKB who has come to kill us. But, I'm going to pause it here, this is an important point to note. I waited, I didn't target the VKB straight off. I'm not interested in an honourable duel. I have allies here. I killed the soft squishy things first, and then we're going to take on the VKB, and I'm going to aim for his tracks. Hold him in place. That allows my allies to put shot after shot after shot into him. And you know what? I'm going to do that again. He puts one shot into me, goes straight through me, but he's now dead. There we go. Did I actually do any hit point damage to him? No. And I didn't sit there long enough to aim at the weak point that I would have had to in order to do any hit point damage to him. I had allies, I just tracked him and let them kill him. And that was fine. Picked up some assistance damage into the bargain. So, scoreline is 8-2. Both of these matches have been a bit kind of stompy. Ah well. I will actually put up a game in the IS-6 in the not too distant future. I'm not sure exactly when it's going to be, but at some point, it's not in a review, it's just some gameplay, where things aren't quite as stompy. Put it that way. Anyway, we've done over 1,000 damage so far, got 1,873 assistance damage, so that's not too bad. That's not a bad showing at all, taking advantage of getting that assistance damage from people being tracked. Hello, artillery. Bounce a shot from the RU-251. Badoing. Take that shot from the RU-251. But I hit harder than he does. There's a Type 59 as well. Hello, Mr. Type 59. How are you today? You good? You're going to struggle to penetrate me, ain't you? And if you're going to give me the side of your hull, well, sure, I'll take that any day of the week. Why not? I'd be foolish not to. And now it's just the type and the artillery. Type gives me his bum. I try and shoot him in the rear. Instead I take out his tracks, because of course I do. I seem to have spent this entire game shooting people in the tracks. And that one goes into the rear, and I pick up the kill, and that's the game. Voila. Another pretty short affair, under 5 minutes. Yeah, in my experience, IS-6 games don't tend to last that long. But there we go. Once again, let's go and have a look at the results for this one. Here we are then, second class mastery, fire for effect, and Bruiser, 1,987 damage done, 2 kills, 1,003 base experience, because on top of that, I had 2,110 assistance damage, because tracking people for the win. 11 shots fired, 11 hits, 6 penetrations, 6 hits received, 2 penetrated, 4 did not. For 490 damage blocked by our armour. Again, bear in mind, if those shots went into my tracks and took my tracks out, then they're not going to show up in that damage blocked value. 6 enemy vehicles damaged, 2 of them destroyed, 1.6 kilometers travelled, and with a premium account, a 75 basically 1,000 credit profit, 45,000 credits without a premium account. In, again, less than 5 minutes. The IS-6 is a lovely, lovely moneymaker. It prints credits. Such a reliable tank and good fun to play. Anyway, let's jump back into the garage once more. Overall verdict on the IS-6 then, and I hinted at this earlier on. Has the old girl still got it? Yeah, she has. It's still a very, very good tank. That limited matchmaking really does go a long way. You can still get some really good results in it. It's still a bully of a tank. There are still tanks you don't want to face off against, and there are still tanks that you drive up to, laugh, and murder. That hasn't changed ever since they brought the IS-6 into the game. That has not changed. And like I said, sure, there are now some new tanks, some more tanks that you don't really want to face off against, but you know what? There are also some more tanks that you do want to face off against. So, overall, I think the IS-6 is in about the same position it always has been. Overall, and that's fine. The IS-6 is a pretty sweet machine. My only slight niggle with it, and this is not from a playing it perspective, this is from a playing against it perspective, when they gave this thing the HD remodel, they really battered the presence of weak spots. They just got rid of loads of them. This hatch used to be a weak spot, and so if you were in a tier 6 or a tier 7 tank, often you could load APCR, or some of them needed to load APCR, some not, but you had a chance of penetrating this thing if you aimed at the hatch. Now it's not a weak spot anymore, as we discussed in the armour rundown, so that's different. And these things, weak spots, I mean, sure, you can argue it, but they're so difficult to hit that in practice what people just do is double tap 2 and put APCR through you, or try to. And even that's no guarantee. So, a bit of a moan about the lack of weak spots, but for the tank itself, it's still a good tank. Would I buy one? Well, that's going to be entirely up to you. I have a confession to make, if you don't already know. I actually got this thing as part of a mission marathon. The very first mission marathon Wargaming did, certainly on the EU servers, gave you this thing as a reward. So I did not pay a penny for this tank. Would I recommend that you pay for it? Well, that's really going to come down to you. If you want a tier 8 premium, because you want to make a load of credits or whatever, then pick one that fits the tanks you like to play. Pick one that fits the crews that you've got available. If you have loads of fun driving around your IS-3 and you want a tier 8 premium, IS-6, not a bad bet. Should you choose it over something like the Object 252? Well, that's really going to come down to your own preference. The IS-6 has preferential matchmaking, which is great. The downside is that there are tanks you do not want to fight. You do not want to fight an E75. You do not want to fight, you know, you get the idea. I've said it before. It is still a very good tank. It makes a lot of money. It's very effective and it's fun to play. One thing I would say, I mean, it's up to you whether you want to buy it or not. It's always up to you. One thing I would say, and I always recommend this when it comes to premium tanks, if you are going to put your hard-earned cash down on this thing, wait for a discount, because 11,800 is still quite a lot of money. It works out to be the equivalent of, what, like 35 quid? Like 30 to 40 euros? You know, there or thereabouts. $40? Something around about that mark. So wait for a discount. Tier 8 discounts turn up every now and again, so wait for one of those. Get a 10% or 15% off it or whatever. Why not? And then pick it up. Sure. It's still a good fun tank. So, there we go. That's my review of the IS-6. I hope you guys enjoyed it, possibly even found it vaguely informative. If you did, as ever, by all means feel free to catch some of my other videos and or subscribe to my channel, and I wish you very happy hunting on that battlefield. Ciao, ciao.